Well, hello everyone and welcome back to Telegraph Live, the Women's Memes Business event, and we have got an absolutely cracking panel coming up. I've been excited about this for weeks since I knew that I was doing it. I'm Camilla Tominey, I'm Associate Editor of The Telegraph, and today we're going to be asking whether women make better leaders. And we couldn't have a better panel, frankly, to discuss this. But before I introduce our two speakers today, let's just have a quick look at some of the background. In 2019, the proportion of women who in senior management roles globally grew to 29%, the highest number ever recorded. However, in 2020, this percentage remained the same. On The Telegraph, we've done a lot of reporting around how women have been adversely affected by the pandemic in economic terms. Statistics suggest that women are twice as likely to be made redundant. And while working from home has produced this wonderful shift in attitudes towards flexible working, women are now more burned out than ever. I'm sure people watching this can identify with that. I'm certainly burned out because I've got 3 children and a husband currently off with COVID. Having said that, some of these statistics mustn't deter us. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce 2 all-round super women. Forget Linda Carter or Gal Gadot. These are 2 women who have been able to smash through the glass ceiling without even needing the magical powers of a cape. First of all, let me bring in Julia Gillard. Julia is the first and only female Prime Minister in Australian history, leading the country from 2010 to 2013. Central to the successful management of Australia's economy following the global financial crisis, she delivered nation-changing policies, including the reform of education, emissions trading, and the provision and sustainability of healthcare. She also gave a barnstorming speech that women of the world had been waiting for on misogyny when she monstered opposition leader Tony Abbott for lecturing her on sexism in 2012. As well as being the chair of Welcome, Julia serves as chair of the Global Partnership for Education, a leading organisation dedicated to expanding education across quality, access and quality worldwide, and Beyond Blue, Australia's leading mental health awareness body. Dame Kate Bingham also joins us. She had long been a leading figure in the life sciences sector before she was appointed to lead the UK's government's vaccine task force in May 2020. And thank goodness she did, because as well as successfully steering the procurement of 350 million doses of 6 different vaccines in her temporary unpaid role, she also oversaw the strategy for their deployment after setting up the infrastructure for clinical trials, manufacturing and distribution. She's now back in her full-time role as managing partner of SV Health Investors, a leading international life sciences venture capital firm with investments in small molecule drug discovery and developmental projects, biotherapeutic developmental projects too, drug discovery platforms in a broad range of clinical areas. Ladies, welcome. Now let's kick off with this, because something interesting happened at the Cheltenham Literary Festival this week. Professor Margaret Macmillan, who is a professor of history at the University of Toronto and a former warden of St Antony's College, Oxford, said this week that she did not think the world would be a nicer place if women ran it. Arguing that she did not think women were more peaceful than men, Professor Macmillan told the Cheltenham Literary Festival that given the training and discipline, they would become as effective as men, citing the examples of Catherine the Great and Margaret Thatcher. So I thought I'll kick off by asking you both, Julia first, do you agree with her? But wouldn't the world be a better place run by women, Julia?
I agree a little bit, but not fully. I think we've got to start with the neuroscience here, and the neuroscience tells us that there aren't some inherent differences, huge differences between men and women's brains, which somehow preordain how they're going to conduct themselves or act as a leader. All of that kind of analysis was fashionable a few years ago when people used to wander around saying men are from Mars, women are from Venus, but most of it's been debunked now as neurosexism, not neuroscience. But it is certainly true to say that men and women from the earliest moments are socialised differently. As a result, women are socialised into being leaders who tend to be more empathetic, more nurturing. Indeed, the research tells us that we only really give women permission to lead if we see in them both strength and empathy, whereas we're prepared to have a man lead if he only exhibits strength. strength. We spend a lot of time on these questions at the Global Institute for Women's Leadership, which I chair at King's College London. My own view is I think it would be a better world if every leader combined strength and empathy, but we should put that requirement on the shoulders of men and women, not just women.
Let me bring Kate in now. Kate, I mean, would the task force to find the vaccines have been better led by a man?
I think somebody with the right skills absolutely could have done a good job. I mean, just touching on Julia's answer, which was a very sophisticated answer about the neurosexism versus neuroscience, which I love. The only comment I would make about a core difference between men and women is testosterone. So men are much more likely to go in and push and fight for something, not necessarily physically, versus a woman. And I think there is something about how we're actually physiologically somewhat different, which applies to our management styles as well.
Well, I'm going to ask you both in a moment to actually describe your management styles. But Julia, when you came into office, it was a very difficult time for the country. Not only were you having to deal with the aftermath of the global financial crisis, but also you had an election on your hands, and the next minute it's a hung parliament and you're having to deal with a coalition. What about women's roles as better negotiators than men? Are we better listeners?
I certainly think it helps during negotiations to have good emotional intelligence, and I think we are in many ways more likely to teach that to and expect that of our daughters rather than our sons, and I think that's an error. I think we should expect it of everyone, because what I found when I did the negotiations to put the government together is that, of course, you had to genuinely listen and intellectually hear what it was that independents and others wanted to provide their political support to the government. But you also needed to be able to read people, and people tell you a lot about themselves in many, many ways other than what they verbalise and say. And so I think that kind of emotional intelligence, that drawing together of people, that welding them into a team did really matter for me.
And Kate, let's bring you in here, because obviously you had quite the task on your hands. There's a huge amount of pressure. You're also having to give up the day job and go into this unpaid role where you know there's going to be a massive spotlight on you to deliver. What's your management style like, and how did you sort of take on that challenge and execute it as well as you did, do you think?
So, I mean, my style is basically to lead by example. So I am not hierarchical. I work in a small business. I've always worked in small businesses, so we don't have such a thing about this is my role and this is not my role. If something needs to be done, I'll roll up my sleeves and we'll do it. So I'm very, very practical, pushy, like a lot of venture capitalists, somewhat ADHD, as in I want everything done yesterday, and if it's not done already, why not? So quite annoying, I think, in lots of ways. But it did mean that when you've got something with a very clear deadline and you have to act quickly, those sorts of get out of my way, I'm just going to get this done, is quite a helpful approach, I think, for the vaccine task force.
Julia, do you agree with that? I mean, Theresa May famously said that she was proud to have been described as a bloody difficult woman. Did you have to be bloody difficult in office?
Well, I think every leader who has to get things done and get them done in a very time-compressed way, in a highly pressurised way, and politics certainly gives you all of that from time to time, has to be bloody difficult. But I would actually come back to the potential stereotyping behind the question. I mean, do we, and I think the research takes us in this direction, do we watch a man who has exacting standards and requires exemplary performance of others and just say he's a tough boss, good leader? And do we see exactly the same behaviours in women leaders and say to ourselves, she's a bit of a, and I will let you supply the word that normally lies at the end of that sentence? I think we do. And so exactly the same sort of behaviours get judged differently. My own leadership style, I'm, not someone who ever raises their voice or anything like that. That's not my style. I try and model stoicism, getting things done, a sense of purpose, knowing why you're doing it, trying to be true to the mission and get the mission acquitted. and I want to try and bring people with me on that journey as much as possible to weld people into a team that really coheres and works together. Now everybody has their fraught days. Everybody has their days when they're not as pleasant and caring about others as they should have been. And of course, I've had my fair share. But I do genuinely believe that most people work best when they feel comfortable rather than overstressed and likely to be on the wrong side of a leader's sharp tongue.
How many times, and I'll ask Kate first, have you been in scenarios throughout the course of your careers where you've been the only woman in the room? And how have you dealt with that, Kate?
Not so often, I would say, over the last, 10 years. Certainly, I was often the only woman in the room 30 years ago when I started in venture capital. But more recently, no. I mean, we have made it a very conscious and important part of what we do and how we invest and how we build teams to include women in leadership positions. So we consciously want diversity, not just gender diversity or ethnic diversity, but actually diversity of thought as well. So you don't want everybody coming from cookie cutter, same universities, same backgrounds. So actually, it would be a very rare exception for me to be the only woman in a room now. I mean, if I look back at our current portfolio in our most recent fund, 43% of our CEOs are women. So, and I would say 100% of our teams have women C-suite. So it is not usual for me to find myself being alone.
And Julia, in the cutthroat world of politics, obviously a lot is said that it's deeply personal to the politician involved. I mean, we've had a massive dialogue about this over the weekend following the tragic death of Sir David Amess, this idea of a toxicity of discourse when it comes to politicians. Have you ever felt that you've needed to sort of dial down aspects of your personality? Have you even felt you've got to dial down your kind of femininity in order to kind of behave like a man in a man's world?
No, and I think for most women, the experience is not a conscious dialing down of any aspect of your personality, but more that, we get shaped by the environments we work in. I mean, I went into the adversarial world of politics. The Australian Parliament is known for its very adversarial culture. We have a very hard-hitting question time. We view what happens here in the House of Commons as the genteel version. We do it for real in Australia, and we don't have the, niceties of Prime Minister's parliamentary questions. The Prime Minister's required to be there every day. The Parliament sits ready to take questions, and mostly the Prime Minister gets the majority of the questions in a parliamentary question time. So, I stepped into the Parliament knowing that was the culture and saying to myself that part of what I'd come to do was to show that a woman could dominate in an adversarial culture like that and win through in hard debates and, hold the House and its political proceedings in your hand in the way that you need to if you're going to rise to the top of politics. So that wasn't, me consciously saying, I want to be a different Julia Gillard. It was me knowing that I had a sense of purpose, that I wanted to be in politics. Politics made a difference. It would give me the power to do things I believed in and put my values into action. And I wanted to show that I could do and was good at the full array of skills that a politician must have, including the cross-party, very adversarial stuff.
And if there were personal jibes or there was commentary that you felt went too far, I mean, what was your response to that, Julie? Did you have to just grow a thick hind like a rhino, keep calm and carry on? Or were there times when you went home and actually felt quite upset by what people had said or written about you?
Well, look, inevitably there are some times when it's got through more than others, but mostly you, in the cut and thrust of politics, end up growing a thick skin. Now, I think we've just got to be a little bit careful here. I'm obviously talking about what happens in the parliamentary chamber. I mean, nothing will ever excuse the violent toxicity that there is on social media and, as we've seen here in the UK, with the tragic loss of David, that violence can spill out into the real world and be directed at political representatives. Nothing ever excuses that. And we've absolutely got to do everything we can to get that out of anybody's democratic experiences. So my reference is to something quite different to that. It is to the nature of parliamentary debate, which over generations has been stylised, sometimes into quite hard-hitting debates. You would see, for example, in the House of Commons, there would be days when Boris Johnson would offer a character assessment of Keir Starmer and Keir Starmer would offer one back. Yes, against that kind of thing, you've got to grow a thick skin. What shouldn't be excused is when those kind of characterisations are gendered or indeed are done differently because of a person's race or heritage or ethnicity or any other form of personal characteristic.
Quite right too. Before we go on, I just want to encourage anyone watching, you can submit a question. I've got this tablet that I can answer. I can hopefully navigate and make sure that I can ask your questions of the two panelists. So as well as mine, you can please do get involved and ask these two wonderful women anything you want. Kate, you want to come in there?
Yeah, I was going to just comment. One other thing that I think is that we need to call out about working as a woman versus a man is we tend not to always have the same shared sort of hobbies and interests as men. So an aspect of being on your own in either in the boardroom or in a management team, if guys go off and play golf or play football or talk about the football or watch rugby or whatever it is, if that's not something that you as a woman want to do, that is quite an exclusionary sort of activity, which I think, again, as women leaders, you need to be conscious of that, because you're not going to be in the forum where a lot of these, discussions will be taking place between men. And that's something that I don't think people should not go and play football or play golf or any of those things, but you have to work sort of harder because you're not going to be in that men's club of doing those sorts of things that male leaders do.
Well, let's also just stick on that theme, Kate. Is there something as well, and I don't like to say this, but I think when I interviewed you for the magazine in the spring, you talked a bit about imposter syndrome. Is there this sense that the female psyche is different to the men's? And, men are very confident and they'll go in and start demanding pay rises every 5 minutes, whereas women actually are sometimes riven with self-doubt, and there's a degree to which sometimes women can self-sabotage. Like, what confidence tricks have you learned, Kate, that have helped you through those sorts of feelings?
Well, I think you're right, and I'd like to hear Julia on the neuroscience side of imposter syndrome, because there clearly is something going on with women about, we have to be perfect before we think we're qualified for something, and men, if they get, qualified 5 out of 10 of the different things, they'll definitely say, yeah, I'll go for it. So, for me, it's all about actually talking to people whose opinions I trust. And if I say, well, I'm not sure about this, and then a bunch of people come back, importantly, family, husband, and actually, in my case, kids, actually, it's incredibly helpful because actually, all you need is just a slight nudge to say, look, get on with it and do it. And that's enough for me. So it's not so much going into a room and I suddenly think, I've got to employ these different techniques because I'm not confident. I'm plenty confident enough to be able to stand up and speak to anybody at any time. So it's more about, do I want to do it? And do I actually think I can deliver? In which case, it's helpful to hear just some reinforcement from people you trust to say, yes, go for it.
Julia, how about you? It's probably quite difficult sometimes to find true friends in politics. You no doubt have lent on your partner for advice during the time that you were in office. But do you have any self-confidence tricks that you've employed? And have you also suffered from imposter syndrome over the years?
You certainly do need, family, friends, people you can rely on, people you can trust, the best of your colleagues. And yes, of course, there have been times when I felt self-doubt about my capabilities. But I'm also just, once again, a little bit nuanced in this area when with my great friend Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who went on to be the World Trade Organization Director General, the first woman to do it, when the two of us sat down to write a book on women and leadership, and we tapped through the Global Institute for Women's Leadership and more generally into the research base about women and leadership, you find some remarkable things. And amongst them, you find that psychologists have studied some of these sorts of things and tried to analyse, is it women's internal voices or is it received cues from the environment? And so, for example, there's a study of a scientific organisation where they would bring scientists together to brainstorm the hardest problems, and they noticed that the women scientists were talking less. And they thought when they looked at that, oh, that's a confidence problem. The women don't feel confident to talk. And they were just about to go down a sort of, lean in confidence strategy piece for the women. But when they took another look, what they realised was actually happening is if a man said an idea that was part right, part wrong, then the group worked to validate the part of the idea that was right and to fix the part of the idea that was wrong. If a woman scientist said an idea that was part right, part wrong, then it was dismissed. And so the received cue from that environment to the women was, unless you're 1,000% sure what you're going to say is right, don't say it. So that could be interpreted as those women suffering from imposter syndrome. But really what it is that the environment and the unconscious bias in the environment is preventing women from fully stepping into the space. And another study, I think, which is really revealing is, women don't go in hard to negotiate for themselves in pay opportunities. That's true. But they've studied that women, if they're negotiating for someone else, so if I was negotiating your pay opportunity, I'd go in hard for you. What I'd do is I'd hold back if I'm going in hard for myself. And that is because people get judgmental of women who are seen to be putting self above others, because we expect of women that they actually put the needs of others before their own needs. And we don't actually have that same set of expectations for men. So once again, the gendered stereotyping baked into the environment takes women's behaviours in a certain set of directions. That's fascinating. Kate, do you want to come in on that? This idea of kind of like social and environmental engineering almost.
Well, I haven't seen the data. I mean, I think it's pretty interesting, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if that's the case. And it may also then reflect back on the women making those proposals or suggestions, because they'll be a little bit less confident about how they portray it. And then, of course, then that gives, as soon as you show any weakness at all, then the rest of the group can come in and close it down. So I'd love to read that data, actually.
Okay, let's just talk a little bit about family life. I've got some questions coming in here too, which I'm going to weave into this. Can I ask you both, Kate first, what were you both like as schoolgirls? I mean, did you have this idea that you were going to go on to greatness, Kate?
No, I was enjoying too much time in the present, actually. So I was very keen on sport and music. So I spent lots of time on the lacrosse pitch and athletics and playing on horses and all those sorts of things. And when I wasn't doing that, playing my oboe and singing. So no, I was far too busy enjoying myself to actually have any long-term thought about careers or anything. So, and I was basically encouraged quite strongly, to put it politely, to do sciences at A-level. So, 17 and 18. And that was probably one of the single best decisions that anyone has ever basically made for me, was to get me into sciences, because then at last I found something I really enjoyed academically, beyond what I was enjoying hedonistically.
And Kate, I think from memory, that was Heather Brigstock, your old headmistress at St. Paul's, who said, you're going to do the sciences. And I remember you telling me, you just went, oh, all right then. And you just did.
That's exactly right. So I ended up doing physics, chemistry, biology. And I think in this day and age, it wouldn't happen like that, but it did then, and it worked for me. And I was really pleased I ended up doing that. Physics I wasn't very good at, although I can still do these sort of funny, magnetic field things. But chemistry and biology was really interesting. And of course, that is the forefront of what we do now in thinking about, drivers of disease and how can you actually intervene in different types of disease with lots of different new kinds of drug formats. So it's not just pills, it's, gene therapies, cell therapies, antibodies, vaccines, all sorts of different things. So it was a great push to be encouraged to do this.
Julia, were you a budding Prime Minister when you were in pigtails back in the day?
No, I most assuredly was not. And I don't think I was very like Kate either. I was always hopeless at sport. And despite my family being Welsh, we're the only non-singing Welsh people on the planet. So no singing in the Gillard family home. We're all, out of tune if we tried. I was really pretty quiet kid, actually pretty shy kid. It wasn't until friends of mine tried out for high school debating and sort of dragged me into it too, that I ever got into anything that was like public speaking. And it wasn't until I was, well into my 20s, having got involved in a campaign at university about education funding cutbacks, and I thought those cutbacks were very wrong. So there was a sense of passion and purpose about it. It was that experience taking me into sort of student unionism, and then after student unionism, people starting to say to me, you should think about a political career. It wasn't until then that the penny dropped that, that was a possibility. I mean, if you'd said to me when I was growing up in suburban Adelaide and going to the local government schools, you could be Prime Minister one day, it would be as fanciful as saying I could, jump on the moon alongside Neil Armstrong. Like, this is a possibility.
And Julia, did you have some formidable female influences in your life? Your mother, grandmother, sisters, aunts? Was there a kind of thread of go-getting women in the Gillard household?
Because we grew up as a migrant family, there weren't, grandparents, etc., in our immediate lives. There was just the four of us: my father, mother, and my older sister Alison. Our mother was a formidable woman. There's no doubt about that. But she, worked in a sort of more humble occupation. She was a cook at an aged care facility, but she was, by dint of personality, a formidable woman. The person who I would identify as a very big influence on me, well, two of them really. I grew up very good friends with twin girls, Lynn and Kathy, and their mother, Marlene, was a very big influence on me and talked to me about aiming high and aiming to go into law. At that stage, I thought I wanted to be a teacher, and she was very pushing of this. No, you should go and get a law degree. You like debating, you'd be good at it. And so she changed my career choice. And then when I was starting to get active in politics, I got to know Joan Kirner, who was the first woman to be Premier of the state of Victoria, to date the only woman to lead the state of Victoria. And I got to watch her experiences in politics up close and learned a great deal from her. And she stayed a very close mentor of mine for the rest of her life.
And Kate, I mean, much is made of the fact that you're the daughter of Lord Bingham, who was an eminent law lord. But actually, I remember you telling me that it was some of the female influences in your life rather than the male that kind of inspired you on, not just your mother, but I seem to remember your grandmother, wasn't it?
Yeah, so my mum's mother. So she was the one I knew better than my father's mother, who was just that much older. So when you're young, you have less of a bond with someone who's quite a lot older. So my mum's mother, I think I take after really quite a lot. So she absolutely independent and high energy, pushy, did everything her way of how she wanted to do things. So from a sort of personality perspective, I think I take after her a lot. From a sort of mentorship, I don't really have I haven't really had professional mentors in the same way, certainly not women. And that I think is a failing. And that's something that I tried to redeem myself to support other women coming through, because I think that is important, and to give people the time to actually explore what it is they want to do, how they're going to do it, and what are the things they need to prepare for. So some of the discussions we've had in terms of, how do you lean into the boardroom discussion? How do you actually stop being seen as the young girl that is new to this whole business and actually get people to take you seriously? So for me, I guess my biggest mentors were probably family, actually, and just sort of expectation of that you should be able to work hard and succeed. But actually, I've got a lecture coming up, so I've been digging in a little bit more onto my father's side of the family. So I didn't know them very well because they were, just that much older. But my grandmother on my father's side was one of the first medics to ever qualify at UCL, so University College Hospital. And again, conducted a highly professional, successful life. My dad's first cousin, born in 1928, again, early qualified as a doctor in Belfast and then came to the UK to practice. So actually, I've got some pretty punchy, pioneering women in my family. I may not have known them hugely well when I was growing up, but it's wonderful to learn more about, what they've been doing.
Well, while we're talking about the generations, let's also talk about motherhood, Kate. And when I interviewed you again for the magazine, you really made me laugh because you interjected into the conversation. I'd just like to say that I have been class rep. You wanted to make sure that I knew that you had fulfilled your parental obligations as well as having a very successful career. And I wondered how much you might have suffered from mum guilt over the years.
A little bit. I mean, it's when kids are young and you go off to work and they burst into tears every time you leave the house. That literally as soon as you've gone, they'll stop crying again. But there's always that little bit of guilt. And so it was. I think it was probably worse when they were little. When the kids, I have three, boy, girl, boy, and when they're not sort of well able to express the fact they don't like you going out to work and so on. But I did make a point of, not every day, but taking them to school and trying to get back, for bath time so that we could read before they went to bed. So not to say I didn't have some guilt, and of course I did, but it got better as they got older because then it became sort of, first of all, more routine for them and me, but also they also sort of understood that their lives were perfectly happy without me being in the house all day, telling them to clear up or whatever you do. And actually, I was probably a better mother by not doing that full time and by having them properly looked after by a professional who was really good while I was at work. And then it meant that I could actually concentrate on slightly more quality time when I was back.
Amen to
and
that.
Yes, I was class rep for all three kids, I might add.
Oh, this is literally superwoman status. I managed to be class rep once when I was pregnant, and that's about it, but only because I was on maternity leave. Julia, I'll bring you in as well, because much was made of the fact, quite astonishingly, when you look back at some of the quotes, of the fact that you didn't have children. And I quote one Liberal MP, Bill Heffernan, who said you are unfit for leadership because she was, quotes, deliberately barren. Another, Sophie Mirabella, said, "You won't need his, ex-PM Kevin Rudd's taxpayer-funded nanny, will you?" I mean, what the hell went on here? Some of these criticisms are beyond the pale.
Well, I think early on in politics, I learned that if you're a woman in politics, there's no right answer to the question, do you have children? Because if you say yes to it, and many of my female colleagues did have children, then the question that comes next is sort of, well, who's looking after them and how do we know you're going to be able to be all in for this business of politics and representing us if you've got to be rushing home for kids? If the answer is, as mine is, no, I don't, then you're easily stereotyped as someone who is out of touch with ordinary family life because you don't have your own children. And I think it then, refracts into this conversation we had before, which is, there's a whisper in the back of our brains that tells us that women should be nurturing and empathetic, and a woman who's chosen not to have children sort of immediately offends against those stereotypes. So I understand, those criticisms, particularly looking back now, how ridiculously it all sounds. And the fact it does sound a bit ridiculous to us, I think, is a good sign that in the sort of 10 or so years since, increasingly, we've been having a dialogue about gender discrimination, gender equality, gender and politics. And I think as a result, some of the things that were said and done, even, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, when I was in office, would not be said and done now.
No, thank goodness for that. And Kate, how did you deal with quite sexist comments about the fact that you'd only got the job as the head of the vaccine task force because your husband was a Tory MP. That must have really rankled.
Sexist or just prejudiced. So, if I was a man and my spouse was a female MP, I suspect it would have been the same, actually. So I think a lot of the comments I would put down as prejudice rather than sexism. And anyway, that didn't bother me because I knew it was bollocks.
Well, that's fine then. Maybe sometimes knowledge that things are bollocks does help us through any challenges that may arise. I'll bring in Julia because we're talking about sexism and misogyny. And if people watching this haven't seen this speech, I did re-watch it on YouTube in preparation for this. And oh my God, this speech that Julia has given, if you're not familiar with it, on misogyny, face-to-face with Tony Abbott in 2012, is probably one of the best pieces of public speaking by a woman in politics that you'll ever watch. I mean, Julia, does it annoy you that people always refer to it, but it was a pretty seminal moment? It was the moment that women were waiting for when you basically turned around to Abbott and said, I shall certainly not be lectured on sexism by a bloke.
Look, the truth is it used to frustrate me a little bit when I first came out of politics and started to travel the world a lot. I took up a number of global responsibilities, and often the only thing people would know about my time in politics was that speech. And you would be there going, oh, I was in politics for 15 years, I was deputy prime minister, I was prime minister, I did a few other things. Apparently my political career all comes down to that one speech and that one moment. But I've kind of at peace with it now because, one, it's just endured so long. It's got me to see more about how it resonates for women. And second, I'm just at peace that, yes, I accept around the world a lot of people don't know much about Australian politics. In fact, a lot of people don't know that much about Australia. And so if they're going to know one thing and it's that speech, then I'm pretty proud of that. I mean, I think, it was my speech given in a particular political context, but why it's continued to resonate is I think most women strike a moment in their lives where they want to say something, they want to speak up, and often the opportunity is not available to them, or they wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning going, oh, I've got the perfect retort line now, but I didn't have it on the tip of my tongue when I should have. And so that speech has come to represent a time when a woman did have the retort on the tip of her tongue.
And I was going to ask you as well about your support of Hillary Clinton. How important do you think it is for women in politics to support specifically other women in politics?
Well, I think women should support women, but of course there's a limit to it. I mean, you're in politics because you've got a set of values. I come from the Labor side of politics, the Australian Labor Party. The Democrats are our sister political party. I think Hillary and I see the world in similar ways. Our values are aligned. But even with women whose values would not be aligned, so for the book I referred to earlier on women and leadership, Ngozi and I interviewed Theresa May. If my family hadn't migrated and I'd stayed in this country, then obviously I would have been someone who was a supporter of the Labor side of politics, not Theresa May's side. But I still think it is important for women to call it out if a woman from any political perspective is being treated differently and lesser simply because she's a woman. And I think that there were some very terribly gendered moments and characterisations around Theresa May when she was Prime Minister, and we should be shining a light on that, and that's part of the process of making sure it doesn't happen again.
Kate, do you think women do enough to support women generally in business? I mean, are you in favour of things like all women shortlists for jobs and things like this? Is that the solution to getting more women in the boardroom?
No, I think positive discrimination and having all women shortlists is regressive and doesn't work, because then you really can't support the idea of meritocracy. So I would not ever hire a recruiter that didn't give me a very diverse, gender balanced shortlist when I recruit. And I make it clear whenever I start a search that is what I expect. To be fair, I think most recruiters, certainly the ones that talk to me, expect that too. So I want diversity, but I want to recruit the best person. And I want to make sure that if they come up with medium rate people, whether they're male or female, I send them back to the drawing board until they come up with first rate people. And again, I insist that that is gender balanced. But I think making it an only woman shortlist opens itself up to all the allegations of, tokenism. And I think that's not helpful.
And in terms of women supporting women in the workplace, Kate, I mean, can sometimes women get into leadership and be a bit territorial because they consider it a rarity to even be there?
I don't really see it in my business so much because, what we do in new drug discovery and development is so difficult, and the cards are stacked so much against you that it really matters that we have well-functioning teams. And that means people have to support each other, whether they're men or women. And so actually the teams that we build are pretty cohesive. And I've not seen a lot of sort of territorial dumpmarking, as you might say, with women leaders. And I wouldn't accept it if I saw it. So I absolutely think women need to be supporting women, but fundamentally they need to support the best people. And so it's all about training and recruiting and actually retaining the best people in the company.
Okay, let me just go to a couple of questions that have been made by some of the people watching. So Karen asks, what are you most proud of and why? To both speakers, please. So Julia, first of all, is there a particular policy or maybe it's not even in your political life, but what are you most proud of and why, Julia, if that's not too difficult a question?
Oh, sure. Look, I am proud of a number of initiatives that we took during my political life. I'm proud particularly of our education reforms. When I was Deputy Prime Minister, I was also Minister for Education. It was education that first motivated me to get involved in anything that looked like public policy. And the fact we improved the quality of education, particularly for disadvantaged children, I'm proud of. I'm also proud that we created an initiative called the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which continues to change and improve lives for thousands and thousands of Australians. So yes, things to be proud of. Of course, life is long and you get to do other things apart from politics. And in my post-political career, I'm very much enjoying being able to support work around women's leadership and bring into the public domain great research, which I think can be really impactful in the world. I've very much enjoyed working on education globally through the Global Partnership, and now chairing the Wellcome Trust, having the opportunity to invest in science and show that science finds a way to solve even the hardest problems in the world, including the one we faced with the pandemic.
Actually, I'm going to ask you some questions about the pandemic in a minute. It would be a remiss of me, Julia, not to read this out, although Helen, I love the fact that Helen's just being as punchy as you two have described yourself by saying this. Hi, Helen here from Blackburn in Lancashire, UK. Enjoying it very much. I'm getting involved in politics and have a vision to get more women confident in getting involved in politics in Blackburn. Please could Julia join us in Blackburn on a Zoom chat to encourage more women into politics? We shall pass on some contact details and hope, Helen. Thank you very much. Kate, what's your proudest moment? I mean, it might not actually be the obvious, which is the task force. It might have been something else you've done in your career.
Yes, it's definitely not that. Not as my proudest moment. I mean, fundamentally, the thing that is probably the biggest decision or thing that I've done that I've got right is actually to get married to a lovely man. And actually, if you can actually make your life decision a really positive, supportive, constructive one, which I've been lucky enough to do, that actually is probably my single proudest moment. And we've got 3 lovely, healthy, happy, apparently grounded kids, which is fantastic. So actually, have I been able to create a positive impact on the world? That is definitely a big plus. Then on the professional side, the times when I get most excited is when I see a drug that we've helped discover and develop, when we get the first efficacy data in patients. And that is a massive buzz because still you're not there. You haven't yet got that drug to market. You've still got a lot of development to do. But whether it's in cancer, in blindness, it's inflammation, in a whole wide range of different areas, where we get that early clinical data, that is for me, is enormously exciting, because it shows that the approach may work, and it just shows that actually then others can come in and follow it. So from a perspective of really pushing back the boundaries of science and how do you actually deliver patient impact, that for me, and there's not a single moment, because there's not a single drug, it's lots of them. And the reason why vaccines is important, but it's not probably my top one, because that was basically a transactional experience for 7 months. And I was given very clear instructions of what needs to be done. We managed to put together a pretty streamlined process to do the work. I was allowed to recruit the team that was able to do the work. And so, yes, it worked well, but it wasn't rocket science. There was nothing particularly unusual or exciting about it.
You're being a bit modest. I mean, you managed to take quite a few gambles on those 6 particular vaccines. You were having to put money ahead. I mean, and equally, you did get a damehood for it. You must be proud of that.
Yeah, so all of that is good. But the people who actually were the innovators there were the people actually discovering and developing the vaccine. So all the different vaccine academics and companies and scientists, all the clinical researchers, the research nurses, all the teams that actually took part, plus the volunteers. So my job was basically like slightly a kid in a candy shop, working out which was the best based on the set of data that I had, and then putting those contracts in place. So yes, I mean, I said it worked well, and the team was great, but my role was only a tiny fraction of actually the work that went in to actually getting those vaccines, both for the UK as well as around the world.
While we're in pandemic mode, Julia, I mean, there's been some criticism of Australia's approach and that of New Zealand, this idea of kind of going for zero COVID, particular Jacinda Ardern sort of hermetically sealing New Zealand down. And of course, you can't eradicate this thing, unfortunately. Is it fair criticism of Australia? I appreciate the situation from state to state is different. I've got a brother in Brisbane who's pretty much freed up, but we've got other relatives in Sydney who are pretty much locked down.
I'm glad at least some of your family members are freed up. I try and stay out of Australian domestic politics in this period of my life, and you can imagine there's probably no more political issue at the moment in Australia than the timeliness of the vaccine rollout, so I won't get in the middle of that. Clearly for many, many months, the situation in Australia was very different to the UK because the borders were closed very quickly, and that did keep the virus out. But ultimately, the thing that protects us from the virus is the vaccines, which is why the work of the scientists is to be absolutely applauded. I think Kate and her team deserve a lot of applause too for the timely access to the vaccines here in the UK. Of course, the big challenge now isn't nations like Australia that have got the capacity to purchase and distribute the vaccine. It's other parts of the world, low-income countries, some lower middle-income countries where vaccination rates are still incredibly low. And Kate would know this science very well, and we talk about it a lot at Welcome. I mean, ultimately, we're not safe from this pandemic until we're all safe, because the more virus that's in circulation, the more likely it is that it mutates in unpredictable ways. So, that task of vaccinating the planet still lies in front of us.
Kate, there's obviously been some news only in the past few hours about delay to the booster rollout. I mean, do you know what's gone wrong here, or how the government can sort it out?
No, I have no idea. I do think it's important for those people who are vulnerable and at risk. It's important they get boosters. I mean, the data is unequivocal. So older people and people with underlying disease should be banging on the doors to get their boosters. But I completely agree with Julia. I mean, at the moment, we have only a few more vaccines in Africa than California being delivered, and that is not acceptable. And we have to ensure that vaccines get to all those people that need it. Viruses are not efficient at mutating, and so every time they replicate, they introduce errors. And we are in a race to basically reduce the viral load of the global population before errors are introduced in the vaccine, the virus itself, that could potentially evade the vaccines. So it really matters. And so that's why, for example, vaccines like Valneva, whose data came out on Monday, that is a slightly improved version of the Chinese vaccines, so the whole viral-based vaccines. That is I don't think there's a role immediately in the UK, given the vaccine stocks that the UK has, but that is a perfect vaccine to be distributed around the world because it does not require complicated cold chain, and the data looks really good. So we, the UK, should be stepping up and sharing vaccines that we can manufacture and get them out globally to those countries that need it.
But not before the booster vaccines.
Well, the boosters, they've already bought all the Pfizer vaccine. That's what they're going to give for boosters. So we need to use the vaccines that we're not going to be using, needs to be distributed.
Okay, now I'll go back to some questions. I can see the clock ticking down. We've got 9.5 minutes. So Gabrielle asks, I like this one. What's a good comeback for when a man accuses you of being a, quote, raging feminist when you're asserting yourself or your rights to be seen as an equal? Julia.
I'd be tempted to say I wasn't raging, but I am now.
Quite right too. But when you're generally sort of patronised or you just making a perfectly reasonable point is kind of dubbed as feminism, how do you react to that?
Look, I think there is a role for humour. I think humour can be educative, but I think there's a role for discussion as well. I mean, often people don't. They didn't set out deliberately, consciously to do something exclusionary, but they have. And I think if you can have the dialogue about it and explain why it is exclusionary, most people will react positively to that. They want to do the right thing. A friend of mine in the UK who is of Asian heritage, lovely woman, she constantly, she's incredibly good at her job, brain the size of a planet, but she can tell story after story where she's been to meetings and the assumption because of her gender and her ethnicity is that she is part of the hospitality staff. So she can literally tell stories about people handing her their coats, putting in their coffee order, and she's got to explain who she is and why she's there. And she could do that in a very combative way, but what she's chosen to do is to say, look, this is who I am, this is my job title, you've just reacted like that to me because of my gender and because of my ethnicity. There's a lesson to learn here, but let's just, now go for a do-over, let's start again. This is my name, what's your name? And so she then gets them into another conversation, but having made the point. And I think that's a pretty elegant way to do it.
Yeah,
the other way to address that issue of being accused of being a raging feminist is basically to ask the man that's saying it, would you speak to your wife and your children like that, or your mother? Because actually, as soon as you make it a bit more personal, actually often the case is, no, I wouldn't treat them like that. Now, if the answer was yes, they would treat their wife and their children and their daughters like that, well, then I think it's a no hope. I've changed job and work with somebody else.
Really good advice. Leanne is asking about imposter syndrome, but I think we've covered that because she's asking what your top tip would be to help silence the little critter. And I think earlier you said, well, canvass the advice of friends and family. What if you're in the room and suddenly you're thinking, oh my God, why am I here? I'm out of my depth. And panicking.
Well, I think often lots of people around the room are thinking that. And I don't think crippling self-doubt is obviously a huge problem because it stops people stepping forward and taking opportunities. but a little voice of self-doubt. I think actually the world could do with a bit more of it. The kind of leadership I'm most suspicious of is the people who swagger in saying, I've got this, I know exactly what we need to do, I'm right across this, because almost immediately you find out none of those things are true. So that little whisper that makes you look again, think again, check the facts again, that's not necessarily a bad little whisper.
No, quite right. Kate?
I agree with that. The only thing I would also caution is that you don't swing the other way so that you become so confident and assertive that you're not credible. So I think if it's an area that you really are not confident in and you don't know much about it, I think it's fine to say, look, this isn't my core area, but I think X, Y, Z, or I can contribute in this way, or whatever the response might be. So I just think it's always about being honest and transparent and not doing yourself down, but not over claiming either. So again, with me, it's come back to haunt me a lot because I've said I'm not a vaccine expert, and I'm not a vaccine expert. But you don't need to be a vaccine expert to be chair of the vaccine task force. But and I think were I to say, well, actually I know vaccines cold, that would be false and might have avoided the allegations of incompetence. But I think you have to be clear about what you can and can't do and what you can deliver.
Yeah, don't be afraid of being honest, basically. Nikki has just messaged to say, Kate, I love your straightforward, clear and concise style. You delivered an incredible vaccine rollout strategy and have been incredibly humble about it. With the uncertainty and mixed messages across the political scene, it was a breath of fresh air. So I just wanted to say thank you. Well, we echo that. Right, 4 minutes on the clock. A quick one to Julia. Somebody is asking that they run a Westminster Skills Centre, providing training opportunities for people who work in and around politics. What's the one best piece of advice you have for women trying to break into politics, Julia?
Oh, the best piece of advice is go for it. Yes, there are still gendered bits. Yes, there are times that you will be treated differently, but the opportunity it gives you to impact and shape our world, to put your values into action is second to none. And so I would say don't be dissuaded by the fact that there's still a gendered bit. And women do have the benefit now when they step into politics that they've seen this movie before. They can learn from the experiences of other women and they can be ready for the gendered moments when they come, and inevitably they will. One of the reasons Ngozi and I wanted to write the book is we wanted to, give women who are thinking about going into leadership, whether that be in politics or elsewhere, the opportunity to learn from the experiences of others and to be ready, because forewarned is forearmed.
Brilliant. Now, we've got 2.5 minutes left, so brief answers to the next one. I'll start with Kate first. Can you name a woman in history who's inspired you, or even a living woman today that you find inspirational?
Well, the one woman that obviously was highly described at and discussed at school was Rosalind Franklin. So here was a lady who was highly expert in her X-ray crystallography, not flashy, not pushy, but just very good. And that as a sort of mantra in life, which is just get your head down and do good work, is a very good lesson as to what we should live our lives. We're not out for accolades and praise. You just want to know that what you're doing makes a difference and can improve the world in some way. And that's what she did. Now, she died an early death. She wasn't recognised in her lifetime. So there are lots of things that were unfortunate, but she made a massive contribution.
Brilliant. Julia, do you have any living or historical female figures that you've always admired?
Well, I come from the state of South Australia, and we were one of the first places in the world to give women the right to vote and the right to stand for Parliament. So many of the activists of that time and in the movement for suffrage in Australia more generally are ones that I admire. And I would particularly draw your attention to a woman, South Australian, called Muriel Matas. Beautiful name, Muriel Matas. She did matter, and she came here to the UK and was part of the protests to get women the vote here, including chaining herself to a grill in Westminster and needing to be carried out on the grill because they couldn't disentangle her. And whilst they didn't record what she said because she had to be taken out yelling as she went, people say that she's the first female voice that was ever there in the House here. So the Houses of Parliament here. So I like that.
Yeah, we love women who need to be taken away attached to grills, don't we? That's perfect. Look, we're now drawing this session to a close. It's gone in a flash because you've both been absolutely fantastic. So thank you so very much indeed. First of all, for sharing your time, because I know how incredibly busy you both are, but also sharing your insights into your life, both professional and personal. I've found it completely enlightening. You're both absolute inspirations, and we're just absolutely delighted to have you here. So Julia Gillard and Kate Bingham, thank you very, very much indeed. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everybody, for watching this Telegraph Live event. The events are continuing because women mean business, and that's the message of the day and all of our campaign. So please keep tuning in, keep visiting the website, and keep reading the Telegraph. Thank you very much and have a very good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.